What's up guys, and welcome back to another eBay miniature rescue. Today, we're going to be trying to rescue Celestine the Living Saint.
Listen closely. Tears won't help this time. Break the ceiling. It's made of thin glass.
So first things first, I need to give a huge thank you to Florifant for sending me this model all the way from Sweden. She sent me Demonettes previously, you might remember. I will link that right up here. Thank you so much for sending this model in. It was awesome to work on, and I hope that I did this the way that you wanted me to. So let's talk about the state of this model right now. Now, the paint is pretty nice. It's not horrible, but the model is broken in a few different places. And in one particular place, the kind of halo that goes behind her head is really fiddly. And I had to do some other things that I'll show in a little bit to fix that. I cleaned all of these parts in my sonic cleaner using LA's Totally Awesome. The instructions that I received when I got this model were to make it as steampunk as I could. Something with a big backpack and, you know, steampunk. So goggles and weird stuff on the model. So I'm going to look through some Caradron Overlords parts and see what I can come up with. The parts that stood out to me the most were from this particular model. I think it's the Admiral, the Archanaut Admiral. And he has a really cool hammer and a big old backpack. And luckily, while I cleaned the model off in the sonic cleaner, the sword hand came off. And it's kind of the same attachment to this hammer, but you know, the arm is a little bit shorter from the sword. It's more from the wrist instead of halfway down the arm. So I'm going to use some green stuff to kind of pad that and then make kind of a gauntlet that goes around this new metallic hand. After getting it mostly attached at the wrist, I'm going to use little snakes of green stuff and wrap those around to kind of make a cuff. Then coming in with a color shaper, I'm going to start to blend in one side of that snake that's on the upper arm and try and smooth that out and push it up towards the elbow. Moving on to the wings, since one of them was already broken off, I used a little bit of green stuff to attach it to a fairly appropriate area underneath one of these tubes. There's kind of a hole there, like a cutout, and it fits perfectly, and I can kind of move the wing so that, you know, it looks like it's supposed to be attached. So I did that with both of them, and then I came to the halo. Now, like I said earlier, there's a little nub on the bottom of that halo where it was supposed to attach to the original backpack. So I drilled out a small hole about the size of a paper clip, and there you go, the little nub fit in. So I glued it in, and hey, it looks like it's supposed to be there. Lastly, and probably most importantly, she needs a sweet set of goggles. So I rolled out a snake of clay and kind of flattened it with my finger to make it look kind of like leather. And then using two little balls and then a little ball stylus, I placed them, you know, goggle-ish distance apart and then pushed in that stylus to make those lenses. Then I placed the goggles on top of her head just above that kind of wispy bit of hair that's coming down in front of her face. And I pushed in the clay just a little bit, kind of wrapping around some of those strands so it makes it look like it's going around and under her hair. After everything was dry, I came back in with Vallejo Surface Primer Gloss Black. Now, originally I was planning on doing some airbrush metallics and, you know, over a gloss primer that tends to work a lot better. And we're still going to get some of that glossiness showing through with the metallics that we are going to end up using. But instead, I went for a zenithal highlight using white ink, which you'll see in just a minute. So we're going to come in with something a little bit new. This is Golden's Phthalo Green. It's a very transparent, highly pigmented paint. And over this zenithal highlight, where I did a little more variation on the wings, it's really going to pick up that color value and give us an awesome dynamic look with just a very little amount of actual paint.
Wrapping my tears with steel, navigating this crazy wheel.
Now coming in with some phthalo blue, I'm going to reinforce some of those darker areas, and we're going to get a nice color shift between that kind of green and bluish green. Just as a quick aside, if you've been wanting to get an airbrush or wondering perhaps why you should get an airbrush, this is literally the reason to own an airbrush, because doing this with a paintbrush will ruin your life. With a little bit of dioxazine purple, I'm just going to reinforce some of those darker areas and put a little bit of that into that darker blue. And that's just going to give us a little bit more variation and tie some of this in with the rest of our model as we finish it. Another part of the challenge with this model was to use a really nice purple for that cape. So because I did that zenithal and it's got a little bit of white to grayish and black variation, just throwing this purple over it as a filter is going to give a really nice vibrant purple. Bringing in some of this copper from Metal Color, I'm going to take care of all of the armor. Now, this copper isn't my favorite copper. That award goes to GW's Screaming Bell. But this copper goes on about 1,000,000 times better than any other copper in existence. So I got a default. Coming in with Vallejo Metal Color Steel, we're just going to start to add some variety to our metallics. A Abaddon black for her hair. All jokes aside, I'm just going to cover the hair with this, and then I'm going to come back with some gray and just give it some highlights.
Coffee at a diner across the street. I was taking a puff from my cigarette, and then I saw a man approaching me.
Using Scale 75's Basic Flesh, Light Skin, a little bit of Indian Shadow, and finishing off with some Pale Skin, I'm going to take care of her singular skinned hand and face. So her head is very, very small, and I was finding it pretty difficult to show exactly how I was doing this on camera. And that's probably because I'm still using, an iPhone to shoot all these videos, which hopefully this year will be remedied, but we'll see. But I'm laying down a base coat of the basic skin, giving it a few highlights and then some lowlights with that Indian Shadow. Then I'm coming in with Reikland Flesh Shade to define a lot of those areas and tie those together. And then I'm going to come back in with some of the lighter tones, moving up to the pale skin to highlight, the eyebrow, the nose, and the cheeks. And of course, I'm following the same steps for the hand, which you can see a little bit better as I move into the lighter skin tone to start to separate those volumes.
Mr. Aladonsky, you're somebody. Why me? Why me?
While doing this, I was keeping this paint pretty thin. You can see there's barely any on the brush. I'm also using specifically a Winsor & Newton Series 7 number 1, which holds quite a bit of moisture in paint and has a very nice point on it. It's very useful for getting in these really tight spots and small, tiny little details. After that paint has pretty much dried, I'm coming back in with a similar consistency of that pale skin and doing the final highlights. I'm also going to put a lot of this into the eyes so that I can come back in with some, whatever blue I find, some kind of light blue, and give her that nice glowing blue eye look.
For your comfort, but you're talking to the moon. Excuse me, miss, I beg your pardon.
Now coming in with some Druchii Violet, I'm going to wash all of the armor, and that's going to define a lot of those nice details. It's going to darken it down and, give it a little bit of a purple tint, and that's going to let it match a little bit more with the wings and the cape. And since the birds have pretty much the same colors as the wings and the cape, I figured it would be pretty appropriate to put some of this purple wash on top of those. Since they seem kind of magical, it made sense.
Air Force Base wrapping up a 5.8 million mile mission. Atlantis completing its 28th mission.
Then coming in with Nuln Oil, I'm going to take care of all of the steel parts.
And bringing home Expedition 15 astronaut Sunny Williams after 195 days in space.
After those washes have dried, I'm going to come back in with copper with just a touch of dark aluminum to give it a little more shine. And I'm going to go over the topmost areas and flat panels of the armor. Really what we're hoping to accomplish by mixing these two colors is to place highlights in areas that would be in, direct sunlight, where our zenithal was. So I'm just trying to lighten up those areas, leaving a lot of the shade in the recesses, and we're just going to get a shinier, brighter armor. Then, using a little bit more of the pure aluminum, especially on all of the steel parts that we already did, I'm going to edge highlight everything and just give it a really nice shiny edge. As we near the end of this video and get to the reveal, and a quick message just before that, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has subscribed and commented and just been a part of this community for quite a long time. It's really meant a lot to me that you all have stuck around and helped me grow as a painter. And I hope that, in the future I can continue to share content and help people do the things that they love. So for this model, I definitely stepped outside of my comfort zone. I used colors that I wouldn't normally use, and honestly, I really like the result. Now, doing a conversion like this, there usually are some issues that you might not know, until after you've primed it. Like, for example, there's a little spot on the wing that I just didn't notice for some reason. And that just happens. But you know what? It looks cool, and that's all that matters. Thank you once again for joining me on another eBay miniature rescue. If you liked this video or something about this video, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing, as it really helps out the channel. If you'd like to see still photos of all the work that I do on this channel, head on over to Instagram at eBay Miniature Rescues. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video.